Hello, my name is Laurie, and I am a retired Kitsap County Superior Court judge. With me today is the current Kitsap County Auditor, Paul Andrews. Mr. Andrews and I are here today at the sponsorship of the Kitsap County League of Women Voters to talk about the upcoming March 10th presidential primary in Washington State. Now, this presidential primary is your one opportunity to help decide who will be the final Democratic candidate for President of the United States and who will be the final Republican candidate. Since President Trump has announced his candidacy, it is likely that there will be no other Republicans on the ballot. But as I'm sure you know, there will be quite a few Democrats on that ballot. So, Paul, the first question I have for you is, how many primaries and caucuses will Washington voters be able to participate in this election year, and what's the difference between them?
So like you already touched on, the presidential primary, we're going to have two primaries this year. The presidential primary will be March 10th. And that'll be for, like I say, the presidential with what you were talking about there. And then the other primary is the general election primary that's going to be on August 4th. So and then we'll have the state general election then November 3rd. The difference really is that caucuses are a function of the political parties, and the primaries are a function of government and electing. So we follow the rules for the primaries that are by state law, RCW, and the WACs as far as how we administer those and how they're tabulated and all of those things, where the caucuses are managed by the parties, and they have their own rules around them depending on what they're doing. So that's really the difference is we only deal with the legal part of the election, where the caucus would be the party.
Well, you're my expert today. So the Democrats had a caucus during the last presidential primary in 2016. Is this March 10th presidential primary replacing those caucuses? And if so, who decided that?
Yeah, so the Democrats decided to participate in the presidential primary, but they're still holding a caucus for the purpose of selecting their delegates. So they've got a process that they've worked out where they'll determine based on the number of votes each of the candidates gets in the primary as to how many delegates would be assigned to them. And so that they'll still be holding a caucus for that purpose.
All right. The League has received a lot of questions about whether the political parties, the major political parties, are paying for the March 10th presidential primary, or is it our tax dollars? And has it always been the same system?
It is our tax dollars. It's 100% paid for by tax dollars. And as far back as I can see, that's always been that case.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the delegates and what role they play in all this? And I think you mentioned earlier that the delegates are established as a result of the March 10th primary. But how does that work?
Yeah, again, it is a party thing, and so my understanding, or our understanding in the office, is that the Democratic Party is going to use the results of the primary again to determine the allocation of delegates based on qualifying candidates, and they've got some criteria behind that as far as what a qualifying candidate would be as far as doing that.
All right. So the auditor's office isn't responsible for that?
No, not at all.
Another thing that seems different this year is the date of the presidential primary. It's much sooner. It's March 10th. Can you talk a little bit about that scheduling? Yeah,
really the moving up of the presidential primary was to make Washington more significant in the process. We were much later in the process in the past, and the candidates were already chosen at that point. And this was an attempt to have our voice be heard, have a chance to have some input into that. And so it was really at the effort of legislators and the Secretary of State's office to really push that we move this up and give Washington State a presence in this process. So.
That sounds like good news.
It is. It really, to have a voice in the political landscape with everything that's going on, it is good for Washington.
The primary is a mail-in election. Is a voter's pamphlet going to be mailed out and then a ballot being mailed out to all registered voters for the March 10th election?
Yes.
Or rather, March 10th primary.
Primary, yeah. So the voter's pamphlet is prepared by the state of Washington, and one pamphlet per household will go out. And so we've got that here as far as the pamphlet. The voter's pamphlet from the state is going to be a green Washington state pamphlet. It'll have all of the information for the various candidates, and then we will be mailing out a packet to all of the voters in the county for the primary. And so it will look a little bit different than the packets that you typically receive. So one of the main things is all of our envelopes always have this magenta color, and here's another example of what a regular primary election ballot would look like. For the presidential, we've distinguished it slightly different, because at this point, in some cases, we have 2 ballots out to households at one time.
Oh, that's right.
Right now we have a February special election that is out there, so there are some people with voting packets for that, and then we have the presidential primary, which are going out. So you'll get your packet in the mail. It'll come in the traditional white envelope addressed to you. Inside, though, there's some key information that we have an instructional guide that explains how to make sure your vote gets counted, because the rules for the presidential primary are different. One of the key things is on the back of the envelope, you have to declare a party. And the declarations were defined by the parties of the state. So the wording is a little bit different between the two because of what they need. So you have to declare your party, you have to sign and date your envelope. And then on the inside, we have a ballot that is color-coded. So it will show all of the Democratic candidates that are on the ballot, and then the one Republican candidate that's on the ballot. And something that is specific to this is that your indication on the outside of the envelope has to match who you vote, what side you vote for on the inside. So if you check the Democratic box, you can only vote for a Democratic candidate and have it count, or vice versa if you on the Republican side. And we will be processing these in such a way that we're going to first sort them by your selection of party, and then we will only be dealing with all of one party's ballots and then all of the other party's ballots. And so as our scanners run these ballots through the machine, if a ballot comes in that doesn't match the party that we're processing, it will get rejected, so it won't count in that case. So we've included a set of instructions that go along with that, just to make sure everybody understands this is different than what you've done in the past, and you need to follow this to make sure your vote counts. I guess something else that I can touch on here too is that use of the secrecy sleeve is really important, and a lot of people probably don't understand that we don't know who you vote for. We don't open your ballot until we've verified your signature and gone through the steps here on this envelope, so it's still a sealed packet. Once we know who you are and that you're a registered voter and you're part of this process, we then start it through our system as far as separating your ballot from the envelope, and that involves the secrecy sleeve, because inside of the secrecy sleeve you put your ballot, and we first open the envelopes up and just separate the ballot to the secrecy sleeve, and we make stacks. And then we do some auditing at each step, because we know how many ballots we were supposed to have opened, we know how many envelopes we should have, and we do some counting, and then these go away. And then they go through kind of a shuffling system where they take all of the stack of secrecy sleeves and ballots, and they do a shuffle so that they don't remember the last couple that they saw here. And then from there, we then start a separation process where we remove the ballot from the secrecy sleeve and we create more stacks again. And again, we do another audit, we count them again to make sure that the numbers match, we didn't lose anything in the process. And then once we get to that point, we do an overview just to make sure that everything is intact, and then it goes off to tabulation. So there is quite a process in securing your privacy and making sure that your vote counts. So.
That's fascinating. I'm not sure I ever knew all of that. Just an odd question. If you don't want to use the secrecy sleeve, does your vote still count?
Yes, yeah, you don't have to use it. This is really for your privacy. But if you choose not to, it doesn't do anything to reject the ballot. It's just part of the process to add that extra layer for you.
And I wanted to go back to something you said at the beginning because I think it's important. A lot of folks will have 2 ballots, and so it's not a mistake to get that second one. And if you could hold up for the camera the difference between the regular ballot and the presidential primary ballot so folks can see the 2 different envelopes and how it's important to open both.
Yeah, this will be your regular envelope that you would get in all general.
And it's all purple.
It's all purple and magenta, where this one specifically says presidential primary return envelope on it, and it's only partially magenta. We do this, the magenta is our color in Kitsap County
Okay.
because it's easier when we're processing envelopes because we actually get ballots from other counties. We have people that maybe live in King County, they work in Kitsap County, they drop their ballot off while they're here. The post office sometimes doesn't pay attention to all of these little details and they end up in one of our ballot drop boxes. And so it's a quick way for us to identify that this is not ours. So if you look at King Counties, they've got a different color scheme. But we all use the same official election mail. That's a requirement. So you'll find that on all of these envelopes. But magenta is our color, and it helps us in managing that. The inside of the packets will look entirely different too, because we don't use color in a ballot other than in the presidential primary. So if you're slightly still not sure what you're looking at, that's another indication. And then we always provide information on the ballot as far as how to fill out the box, and that is an important thing, that you fully fill in the box so that our scanners can read your intent. And if you make a mistake, it tells you how to go about making changes to that. In a regular ballot packet, we also include some additional information as far as if you needed to get a new ballot. If for some reason when your packet came to you and it was damaged, there's ways you can go online and actually print a new ballot from the VoteWa website, or you can come into our office and we'll reissue you a ballot. And the packet talks about that and changing your address. We've had some new law changes that allow you to register to vote on Election Day. So there could be that maybe you were issued a ballot at your previous address and you need to make an adjustment to that. So come into our office to take care of those things.
It's nice to hear all of the safeguards.
Yeah, we have a lot of auditing process that we do just to make sure that everything is counted, and then we have in that just the processes are very defined, and in the end we can account for every ballot. Every ballot that comes through our door, we can tell you if it was for us, if it went to another county, how many of those ballots counted, how many didn't, and why. We have quite a process for that. Again, just for the transparency purpose, so that you know that when you've turned that in, that we've accounted for everything. Another good plug would be the website again, that VoteWa website. We track the status of your ballot through there. So once we've generated a ballot packet and we've put it in the mail, the website gets updated when you log on with your name, first name, last name, and your birth date. You can then look at your ballot status and it'll show that the ballot has been mailed to you. And then after you return the ballot to us and we've run it through our processing machine the first time while it's still sealed, we will indicate that we've received that ballot back, and now it's in the process of having its signature verified. And so once it clears that step and we've verified your signature, we update it to say that now your ballot has moved on to tabulation. And at that point we can't tell you anything more because we don't know which ballot is yours once we've separated it from the envelope. So the last update you will receive is that it's headed to tabulation. Now if there is a problem with a signature, which happens to about 10% of the ballots that we receive, we update it to say that there's a problem. So if you are tracking the status of your ballot, you'll see that, and then we reach out to every individual that we have a problem with verifying their signature. We first do that through a letter in the mail, and we ask you to authenticate your signature again on that letter, and as we get closer towards certification, if we haven't heard from you, we start making phone calls. Again, making every attempt that we can to try and make every ballot count.
I feel like saying thank you. But I want to circle back to something that you touched on briefly when you were going through the presidential primary ballot. In Washington State, voters need to register in order to vote, but they don't need to register as a Republican or a Democrat or any other party. But to vote in this March 10th presidential primary, you have to identify if you're leaning Democrat or Republican. And I guess my question is, why is that necessary, and who decided this? Is that new, or is that just always how it's been?
It's the current legislation. So it's changed over the years. It is our currently you do have to declare your party when you're voting in the primary, and that's the only time that you declare. Like you said, when you register to vote, there's no registering with a party or anything. And it won't be that way for the primary that will be in August. When you receive this packet, you'll go back to just voting how you normally do. The declaration will be the same as it always is, where you're just on the back of the envelope, you'll see it looks different. You're certifying who you are and that you voted on your own, and you've made those statements or declarations. But yeah, so the presidential primary is unique to that, and you have to follow those rules.
There's a lot of Washington voters that lean independent, and they consider themselves either a true independent or they lean and identify as an independent. Is there any box to check if you're an independent, or is there an independent party primary?
Well, so for there is not an independent party primary administered by Washington State. There are independent parties that have their own qualification caucuses, and they go through a process to get them on a ballot. But to have them be part of our presidential primary, there's RCW that stipulates that they have to receive more than 5% of the total vote in the previous presidential election. So you would need a candidate, like in this year, you would need a candidate from an independent party to, in the general election, receive more than 5% of the vote. And at that point, they would then be recognized by the state of Washington, and then they would appear, we would have a third option that would be identifying as an independent.
Because in years past, I think I've seen libertarians appear, but that might just be a poor recollection on my part.
And that may have been just one of our legislative things at the time, but where we're currently sitting, it is major political parties, and they've defined that with how they get votes in the previous elections.
So to pin this down, even if you consider yourself an independent, you have to identify as either a Republican leaning or a Democratic leaning in order to vote in the March 10th presidential primary.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Now, can you talk with me a little bit about how the results of this March 10th primary will be used? I know we've touched on it already, but I wanted to get those details before the voters.
So the parties really get to decide in the end how they're going to use the results of the vote. My understanding is, in the case of the Democratic Party, they're going to use the results of the vote to determine, to allocate the representative, how many representatives there'll be in their caucus. So each candidate will have some form of representation, and they've got some criteria around how, what the minimum percentage of the vote cast would be to have that representation.
So it's not a winner-take-all situation?
My understanding, it's not.
No.
It's outside of our control. We're just tabulating and giving the results. They're going to do what they want with them from there.
Does the Secretary of State provide any guidance to them at all on how they can use that information?
To my understanding, no. It's up to the party at that point. There's no state law that describes how they have to use the results of the presidential primary. The only thing is there's a list of guidelines and requirements. So like on the list of candidates, as an example, these had to be provided to us from the parties by a specific date. And so one of the things that you'll notice in here is that Cory Booker shows up as a Democratic candidate. However, he stopped, withdrew from the party, or from the process, but his name had been submitted by the deadline date that we needed from the party, and then he withdrew a week later, and we couldn't remove him from the ballot at that point because we had these already off to press. And so, and I think there's one other candidate that is in a similar situation, but Cory Booker was the one that specifically. So we have to abide by those requirements as far as Secretary of State, but there's nothing outside of that for the parties.
So are the results of this primary public record, or is the information public record that is garnered?
So there is some public record in this, and so name and address of a voter is public record. Their political party designation or selection that they did for this would be part of the public record. And then there's some like demographic information, if you're male or female and what your age is. Outside of that, phone numbers and emails are considered private and they're not part of the public record. So none of that is shared with the parties. And that, again, kind of touching back to outside of, when you fill out your ballot, we don't know anything inside of there. So, and that there are some rules that are, again, state rules as far as what is public record and not record. So,
what about the actual results? That one candidate got 4,000 votes and the other one got 2,000. Is that public record or published in any way?
Yeah, we will publish it on our website and we'll share it with the Secretary of State's website as well, and they will also total for the state. So the 39 counties results will all be compiled for a state result on how the primary went. But again, outside of that, your individual vote is still private, so they don't know who you voted for.
Okay. Well, I think you mentioned this, but who decided which presidential candidates are on that ballot?
The parties do.
Okay.
They have their own criteria for how they're chosen and how they've culled down their list. And so, yeah, we have our list of candidates that was provided independently from by each of them.
And that was quite a while ago, it looks like.
Yeah, they came into us January 7th or 10th. I think we had to have that information.
It doesn't seem like quite a while ago, but boy, things change so quickly.
Yeah, and the amount of work, so in our case we have 185,000 registered voters, so we needed to get the information and get it formatted into our ballot style and then sent off to our printer and then back and then to our ballot insertion company. They take and make these packets and then it has to get to the postal house and just on and on and on.
Okay,
so that's why we have deadlines. Yeah.
So the results of the primaries impact the national organizations, the major parties, because they can use that however they want, but you've kind of given us a sense of how they're going to use that information.
Yeah, and we have no indication as far as how they'll use it. We understand on the Democratic side what their intent is, but then it becomes a will of the people at that point and how the party uses it from there.
Now, I noticed on my most recent ballot that it was postage paid. Will the March 10th presidential primary ballot also be postage paid?
So, yeah, all elections administered by the state of Washington, the current law says that they will be postage paid, and the presidential primary is one of those. So the primary in August, as well as the general election coming up in November, will also be postage paid. So anything we administer in our office is subject to that.
And then you mentioned that you could register the day of the election to vote. Is that true also of this primary?
Yes. Yeah, so on election day, so in Kitsap County, we have our office that you can come into to register to vote. We have a voting center in Bremerton now. This is our first time that we will have a center in Bremerton at the Marvin Williams Center, and it's a great location for reaching the public. We recognized Bremerton as being one of those areas that is underserved and central to the county because of the shipyard and the ferry terminal and the amount of traffic that goes in and out. It made the most sense from a convenience standpoint of serving Kitsap County. So we've partnered with Marvin Williams, and they're really excited to have us there, and the opportunities for us. Likewise, we're very excited. They have ample parking with a great area where we can actually collect ballots in the parking lot, so that cars can just come in and out because we don't have a drop box right there. We have the closest drop box is over at the Norm Dix building. So
that's right.
we're going to set up so that we can accept ballots there, so you don't have to get out of your car. And then inside the facility, we can expand as need be. So if there's a lot of demand, we have room to kind of grow in the space as the voters need to utilize our services there. So we have the county facility, we have Marvin Williams, and then we have Olympic College in Paulsbo, where we will have vote centers on election day. And so you can go in, you can update your voter registration information, you can get replacement ballots, you can vote there. We have assisted voting devices, so if you have any disability that might, trouble reading the ballot, or we have audio equipment and we have video equipment that helps you with that.
Fantastic. So Paul, I've gone through a lot of the questions that the league formatted. Is there anything you want to add at this point to help us understand what's going on, or do you think we've covered it?
Your questions have been really concise. You've covered a wide range of the process that we're going through here as we get ready for the presidential primary. The only thing I can add really is just to encourage you, one, vote, please. But more importantly is we're asking everybody to vote early. And by early, what we mean is 5 days.
Okay.
And it's because we live in Kitsap County, and again, this is something a lot of the voters don't understand, is that all of the mail in Kitsap County leaves the county to be processed by the post office before it comes back. And so depending on where you live, if you're on Bainbridge Island, your mail goes to Seattle, and it's processed in Seattle first, and then it comes back to us. If you live in the rest of the county, it goes to Tacoma and then comes back. And so with that amount of time, if it doesn't get processed in time and make it through their machine so that it gets their cancellation stamp on it that shows that you voted on election day, we have to reject your ballot.
Oh.
And it was really unfortunate. It was a year ago in February, we had a problem where we had that snowstorm.
That's right.
And we had a lot of ballots sitting in blue boxes, which are postal boxes, and there was nothing we could do about that. Those ballots were property of the U.S. government until they were processed and brought back to us. But if they were put in one of our white election boxes, and we've got 22 of those around the county, we were able to bring your ballot in because we were able to get crews out there and get the ballots out or secure that box by 8 o'clock on election night. So your vote did count, but we had record number of ballots that actually got rejected because they didn't get there in time. And so knowing that, we're really encouraging people to please vote early so that we don't have the problem of having to reject a ballot, because really, I mean, we want to count everything. It's just the law. We have guidelines that we have to follow, and that's the biggest one is the date on the envelope when it processes through the post office.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the tips and for helping us understand how this upcoming March 10th presidential primary is going to work.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for being a part of this. We've done a lot with your organization throughout the year, and we look forward to many years of assisting and providing what we can to get this message out.
Well, for the audience out there, the League of Women Voters strongly encourages you to participate. I join in their enthusiasm, and there's only 3 things you have to do. 1, review your voter's pamphlet. 2, review your ballot, the information, and mark it correctly. And 3, mail it in early or drop it in a box. And I'm sure that there will be available somewhere on a website the location of those boxes. So read, write, and mail. Thank you so much. And I look forward to continuing the education by the League of Women Voters. Thank you.